All right, today we have a very special guest on. We have
Vince
Vince
Molinaro.
Molinaro with Lee Hecken Harrison. How you doing today, Vince?
I'm really good. How are you?
Very good. And we just could not get in the same city at the same time, so we're actually doing this via Skype. Vince, y'all wrote a fascinating study on the gap in leadership accountability. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So so I spend my days working with organizations who often are at inflection points. Sometimes they're driven by industry changes. So if you think about retail, certainly oil and gas is in that same position,
Yes.
given what they've been going through over the last 2 years. And at some point in time, the senior leaders look to the future to say, okay, where do we need to go? We've kind of weathered the storm. And what's the future going to be like? And what's the implication of that to the kind of leadership we're going to need? And so, a lot of my clients say, we need leadership to be stronger than it's ever been if we're going to be successful, not only today, but tomorrow. And what's also been different and why that point becomes really critical is that, we've got huge expectations of anyone in a leadership role where, certainly when I started in the workplace, most of the focus was on the leaders at the most senior ranks of the organization. And the rest of us who were managers just carried out our jobs. The world was a simpler place. The world worked as long as you had strength at the top. Today, it's all about we need leadership to be strong in every seat, in every chair, in every role. And so now companies need to think about how do we make sure that that strength exists across the whole organization. So that's the priority. But what we saw was companies, as a result, spending close to $65 billion globally on leadership development and really not satisfied with the results at a time when we need leadership to be at its strongest. And so what we found was we're investing. We're not seeing it turn into better leadership. And that was kind of the quandary. That was what we were trying to explore. And what we found was this issue of leadership accountability, that we simply have people in leadership roles who've taken on those roles for a whole number of reasons, but don't fully appreciate what it really takes to be a leader.
Yeah, let me stop you right there because you
Yeah.
ran across something that was really important that a lot of people may not know that are watching this. You can actually measure leadership potential. You can measure skill sets, right? And then you can compare that to what would be ideal so you know what your gaps are. A lot of people don't understand you can develop leadership like a lot of other skill sets.
Yeah, you definitely can. But what we have found is that the gap, so you can do the skill gap piece and you can kind of say, here's our baseline, here are the skills and capabilities in terms of where we need to get to. But the issue around leadership accountability wasn't around skill and capability. It was more around the mindset and will. It was more around, are you prepared to take on the pressures? Are you prepared to do what's really necessary to be successful as a leader? And that's ultimately the gap. In fact, my book, The Leadership Contract, is really, as my clients say, it's really about a mindset. So how do you need to think about your role as a leader? And so we were seeing this challenge anecdotally, client after client, right? We're investing. We're not seeing it turn out because I think a lot of the leadership development has overemphasized the skill and the capability, which is important. I'm not saying it's not. But what has been missing was this focus on how do you need to think about your role at a time when the expectations are higher, the role is changing more dramatically than ever before. And I think fundamentally leaders are struggling to keep up. And that's not a criticism on leaders. That's just the reality of being in business today. And certainly in oil and gas, you ask any leader in that industry, and it's not an easy go right now, and it hasn't been. And I think people are seeing the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. But now, turning it around, driving consistent growth, that's a new leadership challenge for a lot of leaders in oil and gas.
Leaders, especially in our industry, are now faced with challenges that they never had to worry about before. So what it takes when you talk about mindset, it's a way that you think about things has changed. Our industry is changing. The world is changing because of technology,
Yeah.
and there's no going back. So what was cool about your study is y'all spent a lot of time diving into the details about how executives need to think differently so that they can act differently.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely align with that, right? And again, it's not on leaders, it's just the world that we're at right now. And I think there was a time and I'm not the only one who says that. A lot of people have written about this, where maybe a generation ago, everything you did in the past prepared you for the present and the future, and now with change happening at such a clip and such a pace that whatever you've done in the past is probably largely irrelevant, and so you're dealing with new challenges, new problems that you may not have encountered before. The other thing that's changed is the model of leadership is different. Whereas in the past, when the world was a simpler place, you could have a really strong CEO in place who knew the industry, knew what the strategy was. The rest of us, as I said before, kind of just did our jobs, carried out orders. We were foot soldiers. Now today, what they're really recognizing is, I got CEOs saying, I can't do this myself. Even my executive team can't do it. We really need to tap the brains and the intelligence that's in all of our leaders and our employees if we're going to figure out the way forward. And it's also because organizations, while they still may have siloed structures that are kind of pyramid in shape, how leaders work is far more horizontal, right? We got global companies that have global matrix structures. Work is far more cross-functional in nature. Clients and customers are wanting more interdependent solutions to their problems, and you got to bring different perspectives and different expertise. So the world in which we lead is far more horizontal and also virtual. So now you're leading people that you don't even see on a regular basis, other than maybe through Skype or through a phone call or through a text message, and that's another unique challenge that leaders face.
Yeah, and we're doing that right now. We're doing this virtually.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a perfect example. And also in oil and gas, this new younger workforce that's entering the industry, they need to be led completely different. The old ways of leadership style, the kind of top down, do what I say because I'm the leader, that doesn't work anymore. And what's going to happen is the companies that don't understand that, they're going to have retention issues. And our industry has a shortage of talent already. So the leadership styles themselves are going to need to change because this new younger workforce, which I actually love this new younger workforce. It takes you a little while to get used to them, but they're doing some fantastic things out there.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I would say probably it happened gradually, but I think the boomers, right? Their career ethic was you endured no matter how bad it was. Right. So if you worked with a really bad manager or boss or a jerk, you almost wore it like a badge of honor. I was sort of an early stage Gen Xer, and when I saw myself compared to the boomers, I knew I was already wired differently. I came in with an expectation of really wanting to work with a great leader, and I had that experience very early in my career. But that experience wasn't as much. Right. Millennials come in expecting to work with great leaders, and if they don't get them, they don't endure like the boomers. No. Like you say, they leave and they go on to find the great leader, at another company. And so that's the risk that a lot of companies face. And I think what's going to be actually more interesting is this Generation Z that's coming, because I think this generation, and my children are that. I look at my children, they've had more leadership development already than I had in my entire life. They have had leadership opportunities thrust upon them. Their schools have created leadership opportunities. My kids, when they were in elementary school, there was a monthly leadership award that was given out to a student that was nominated by their peers. So leadership has been part of their thinking, and I think they're going to come into our workplaces and go, "What's all this talk about leadership?" That I think they don't know how to be anything but. And so I think the Gen X are going to have an interesting challenge once the Gen Zs come in, because I think they're going to challenge them and push them. That's my thought. We'll see what happens.
No, it's so funny. You and I did not talk about this before we turned the camera on. I'm a big believer in the Gen Z. You can't fool them. They read something on Facebook, they know instantly there's a different slant to it. Political, monetary, whatever. They're hardworking, they're smart, they're go-getters. But you're right. They've been given leadership training since 5 years old. So I have a lot of hope for our industry when the Gen Zs come in, because I think they're going to make some really great, powerful changes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So if companies out there want to learn more about this study, because anybody out there that's watching this, if you work for an organization, you need to understand about these gaps in leadership. This is a very well-written paper. I'm not an organizational development psychologist. I was able to read through it. I got a lot of value out of it. If people wanted to find this, where should they go?
Well, they simply need to go to the Lee Hecht Harrison website, which is LHH.com. And if they go into the insights section where our research is, they can download a complimentary copy of the report. And what we've done with the report, because what we've been finding with leadership accountability is, globally, this is an issue, right? 72% of the over 2,000 respondents said that leadership accountability was a crucial business issue that they weren't even talking about. And there's only 31% satisfaction. So that's the gap in leadership accountability that we found in over 20 sectors that were represented in our study. But we didn't just write a report. We actually also included a series of audit questions for the reader to kind of take the ideas in the report and say, okay, so how is my company doing against some of these findings? And so we didn't want to just create a report. We wanted to create a really useful document that readers could apply in their organization.
Yeah, it's nice as you read through, you literally, it's a tool. It's a tool for you to do almost a self-assessment of your organization, but it's very easy to do. It's very easy to understand. Our listeners and our viewers actually know Lee Heck Harrison well. You're actually our travel sponsor for the podcast for 2017. So we'll put a link to both Lee Heck Harrison website and actually to the study that we're talking about now. Like I said, if you're watching this, go get it. Lee Heck Harrison is giving it away for free. It's very valuable, and it's actually very useful if you're in the business world to see what's going on out there. Vince, if people want to reach out to you personally, I'm guessing LinkedIn probably is the best way.
Yeah, I like using LinkedIn. It's just it's easy and people can track me down, and it's just Vince Molinaro. I'm sure you'll show that information, and happy to connect with people.
Yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes too. All right, Vince, it's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing some of your insights. I find this sort of stuff fascinating, and it's really cool to see that y'all are on the cutting edge of this, looking forward, not looking behind you, but looking forward. This is going to help a lot of companies figure out how to get that last little 3 or 4 or 5% they need to compete in today's world. So I appreciate having you on today.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah.